Welcome to the MuseCast, where we squeeze every last drop of inspiration out of Sunday's sermon.
Welcome to the MuseCast. I'm Shawna Boren. That is Dan Kent. Dan is in his groove because he's in the office right now and no one's there because the office is closed today. So he is a happy camper. Dan, how was your weekend?
It was great. I got to tell you, so like usually I have a hard time working in the church here because, there's a lot of people. We do a lot of things here, counseling and community outreach stuff. And there's just so many things happening here. And there's so many great people here that I can't get anything done here because there's just too many people to talk to and stuff like that. So I don't work from the church very often, but it's closed today. So I'm here all by myself. And I'm actually sitting in Greg's office. And it's kind of been torn down because they repainted it. So it's not, normally it looks a little fancier than this, but I thought I would share something kind of cool that I found as I was snooping around in here. This is a picture of Greg Boyd and Paul Eddy from 1994. Okay. And this is like right after they finished Cynic Sage or Son of God, and they're holding this manuscript. It is so cool. I love this picture. Look at that. Can you see it? Here, I'm gonna go to the big view so that we can see the whole thing here. Yeah, so isn't that cool? So they've got the manuscript right there. Yeah, and this was like 2 years before I met them. So I was I don't even think Paul was not even a full-time professor at this point yet. He was just got out of seminary, I think. But so I met them just a couple years after that.
Greg
at the college.
Greg looks so happy in that picture. Not at all.
Yeah, seriously, look at that. What? Yeah, he just finished this major manuscript, and you know what it is? They're trying to look cool. That's what they're trying to do. So
done with that manuscript. 1994. I wasn't even born then. So what was it like in the world back then? I'm kidding. I'm so kidding.
Oh my goodness.
Dan, you were about to lose your mind.
Yeah, that's that. I wouldn't doubt it, but
no, trust me. I had been on the earth for a while by the time 1994 rolled around. So. All right. Well, I would like to close this by saying I still feel like Greg and Paul would have been a little bit more happy finishing that massive manuscript. That's all I'm going to say. They should have showed a bit more joy. Well, Dan, I think because you were in the good doctor's office, I feel like today's summary is really going to pack a punch. So,
yeah. Well, I mean,
why don't we go ahead and
totally. The sermon definitely packed a punch. It was it's it's such a classic text, and I agree with Greg. He said that in his opinion there's reason to argue that in terms of guiding Christians, this is one of the most important verses of the Bible because it literally defines what does it mean to be children of God, and what it means is that you develop this ability to love even to the extent that you love your enemies, and you don't discriminate who you show this love toward. And so that's really sort of the thrust of what Greg goes after. This is in Matthew 5, like 43 to 48-ish. I actually don't have it written down, but I think that's the passage. And so what Greg looks at here is this idea of, because it says a couple things. It says to give to anybody who asks, instead of retaliating, to love your enemies and to pray for those who persecute you, and just this constant showering of love, irregardless of what the other person is like and what they're doing. And so like he did last week, he kind of looked at some hermeneutic principles here because you have to look, okay, what exactly does it mean to give to everybody who asks in the first century compared to now? And so you do have to do some discerning there. And so too, you also have to do some discerning when you talk about loving your enemies and to bless those who persecute you. And there's a lot of stuff that he said. I mean, he went for almost an hour. I mean, he went a long time yesterday, and it went fast, but there's just a lot there. And so I guess what I would do to summarize it is I would say this, that we are supposed to mimic or imitate God's love. And the way that God loves is that he loves like the sun shines and the rain falls, that the sun shines on good people and bad people, and it rains on good people and bad people. And it's just this constant love. And I think what's really interesting is that, this idea of loving your enemies and praying for those who persecute you, the Apostle Paul talks about how, God loved us when we were still enemies. In Romans 5:8, it says, and that he sacrificed himself while we were at our worst, when we were still sinners. It says in Romans 5:10. And that's the same thing here. It's the same principle. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you in the same way that God loved his enemies, us, and he prayed for those who persecuted him or sinned against him, us again. And so the same love that God has been given me, he also expects me to now have that love for others. And I think what's really profound about this teaching is that it goes against our common sense. It really challenges our common sense of how we should respond to these circumstances. And there are so many forces and narratives and myths and kind of just things that we've learned in culture and in families growing up that shape how our natural inclination is going to be in response to people who we view as a threat or as an enemy or whatever. And so what Jesus is saying is that all of those natural inclinations are all based on common sense things that are just ungodly, and we need to challenge that. And in particular, the common sense notion that he really goes after is this myth of redemptive violence, he calls it, which is this idea that violence can solve our problems. Maybe it can't solve all of our problems, but there are circumstances when violence can solve our problems. And Greg argues, and I think he's right, that no, it just creates new problems is what it does. And it's so fascinating to watch movies. And he talked about the Marvel movies, but like even like Dirty Harry and all the action movies from the 90s and the 80s, they all had they followed the exact same formula. You show a bad guy and you show this peace-loving, nonviolent hero. But at some point, the bad guy gets so bad that the hero has to set aside his peaceful heart and get vengeance. And that's what ends up saving the day. And that sends a message to everybody that this is a valid solution. This is a valid response to enemies. And so in summary, what I would say is that what Greg is saying, Jesus is teaching us that we should not base our decisions on the merits of the people in front of us, but we should base our decision on how to treat people on the character of God and how God has treated us. And I just think it's a very challenging teaching and there's a reason why so many theologians have worked so hard to dance around this, because societies don't know anything but violence. And that's my summary.
Yeah, there always seems to be. I love it. Thank you. Yeah, I think what society there in summary, I think that's so true, that society will always find a way or a reason to justify acts of violence that benefit them. So I think this is a challenging passage. I think the way I think about this, the way I want to talk about like what stood out to me is I have been reflecting on just the very idea and the fact that this portion of passages was not like, these were not the go-to scriptures that I heard in the church growing up. I honestly, I was racking my brain ever since Sunday to try to think through like sermons I may have heard about this prior to being involved at Woodland Hills. And Dan, it wasn't the meat and potatoes. It really wasn't taught. It really even wasn't the dessert. Like we just did not, this was not a primary teaching. And so I find that interesting. And if I begin to kind of guess as to why, I that doesn't go anywhere very, very well for me. So I do find it interesting that there are many in the church who have not taught on these passages. And yet not all, but some of those same people will absolutely look to certain Old Testament scriptures and say, if it was true, then it's true now. But this somehow, Jesus' own words kind of get skirted underneath the rug. And so it's still something I'm processing, to be honest with you.
Well, and that's a good point too. Like, I guess for me, this is how I interpret this, is that I don't know what I would do in a situation where somebody, threatened my life or my wife's life or whatever. And I don't know what I would actually do. And I might not respond in the way that Jesus calls me to respond. And just because I don't know if I'm developed spiritually to that level yet. And I think of those situations and how scary those situations are. And I doubt myself often. And, but
absolutely.
But that doesn't mean that what Jesus is teaching isn't the standard, and it's not the expectation. And so for me, that's we should definitely have mercy toward people who can't live up to the standard, and we should have grace with one another. But what I see is people trying to water down the standard, and I don't think that's the right thing to do. The standard is, I think, crystal clear. So, yeah.
And I find it interesting that whenever, and I'm sure you've heard this too, so whenever we talk about nonviolence, and whenever we talk about passages like this one that are so pretty crystal clear, and like you said, the standard of what Jesus was saying, it's always the what about, and the what about is like this extreme thing that more likely than not, we're not going to encounter.
That's right.
Somehow that's what about someone. And I can honestly say, like you, I don't know what I would do. I know that, I'm not a gun owner, so that's not an option for me. My thought is I would probably try to get my family like the heck out of Dodge or something. I don't know. But I do find it interesting that, and I'm not confident that I would respond in the most Christ-like way, in complete honesty. But I just find it amusing / frustrating / intriguing that that's the place that people go to almost immediately, instead of everyday interactions with people, everyday interactions with your neighbor, a coworker, someone that you don't get along with. Like, we don't want to talk about that. We want to say, what if this huge thing was coming your way? And, so I don't know if that's our way of deflecting or what. Yeah. What do you think?
Well, I think there's probably a lot of stuff going on there, but the fact that is always what happens, like, or what about Hitler? Stuff like that. There's just always, it's either what about Hitler or your daughter's going to get raped. I mean, it's always one of those two things. And it's like, to me, the fact that you go to these extremes right away so quickly is, I can't help it. For some people, at least, there's got to be a compulsion to, they want to get rid of the standard. They want to lower the standard because they can't they're personally unable to live up to it, or they don't like the idea of having to live up to it. And it's not a pleasant part of being a Christian. It takes incredible courage. And I don't know if I have the courage personally.
I know.
But what I won't do is I won't water down something that is meant to be the standard.
Exactly.
And Shawna, for me, I read this in Miroslav Volf's book, Exclusion and Embrace. He talks about this fear, this very legitimate fear that, and to me, it's one of the scariest things of being a Christian, is the idea, because I could see like a situation like, if we're going to talk about extreme situations, let's talk about this extreme situation where maybe like I'm preaching on Sunday and it's live on YouTube, and let's just say some terrorists from some other religion come in, all right, and they surround me with guns, okay, and they say, either denounce your faith or we're going to shoot you, and I stand up and I say, I will not denounce my faith, I'm following Jesus, and they shoot me, and that video goes viral, and I become this Christian hero. You can think of like fantastic things like that, and there's something like, wow, that would be a great way to go, but the scariest thing is to die and to be killed and for no possible good reason. To go and maybe be a missionary in some third world country that's violent. Maybe you're trying to help Syrians or something, and you go there and you're there for 2 days. You don't even met anybody yet, and you get killed, and nothing comes of it. Yeah. It's just this you're dead, and nothing comes of it. And for a great many Christian martyrs, that's the way the story goes. It's not. It doesn't really help in any way whatsoever, and that kind of meaninglessness and that pointlessness, that's the reality of being children of God in a world that is not godly. That's the scary thing that we all have to face. And and I understand the compulsion to want to lower that standard, because I don't know if I have the guts for that.
Well, and that's just real. That's reality. Like, being a follower of Jesus, there are so many benefits, right? Like, to be a kingdom person it's this glorious, lovely life, but it's not all easy. And we're not guaranteed, an easy path. And to follow Jesus, to truly follow him and to follow his words is not easy. Like, if it were easy, I'm sure everyone would do it, no problem. So I understand the compulsion to water it down. But the fact of the matter is we need his grace and his Holy Spirit to help us become more like him in those areas in which we are not. And I think there's nothing wrong with saying there are so many ways in which I fall short. But at least I have like the marker, like I have, the goal that he's laid out for me. So I at least know like what I'm aiming toward. Instead of wandering about aimlessly. So yeah, I'm with you. I don't know what I would do. I would probably really muck it up badly as far as making a stand and loving in a moment of faith that would cost me my life or my family's life. Chances are I would muck that up. But it is what it is. Jesus is saying what he said, and it is something to strive toward. I wonder, Dan, do you think that, because Greg kind of talked about this a little bit, about like we get really good at overcomplicating it. Like, well, what do you mean by love? And blah, blah. Like, do you think that sometimes people just in their honesty are like, okay, love is seen as a community thing, a relational thing. And to say that you love some sort of person out there that you don't physically know, or, you're not interpersonally related with, and to say that you'd be willing to give your life for that, like that can get a little murky. And then to even go as far to say, if they mean to do you harm, you would still act in love toward them. I wonder if people aren't, possibly, I'm trying to give people an out, but maybe it's kind of hard for people to wrap their brain around that, because we see love as, what's right here around us, what we know and what we're familiar with, and the people that we've surrounded ourselves with. Does that make sense to you? The roundabout question I'm getting at?
Yeah, I think so. There's probably a lot of different directions I can go with that. But again, for me, I come back to just like, we need to have some mercy and grace for each other and for ourselves. Matthew 9:6, Jesus saw the crowds and he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless. Those are the people who are called to make these nonviolent sacrifices if the circumstances require that. And, we're people who, we have like, we're just trying to get by, we're trying to, we got a mortgage to pay and we got all of these kind of just to live. We have, so many obstacles and things that we got to do. And it's hard to like, prepare yourself for something like having to give your life or something that extreme. But that's not what the verse is about. That's a potential, kind of extension of what the verse implies, but for the most part, it's really just talking about shining love on your enemies and shining love on everybody, and to treat people in front of you, not discerning them based on like your own kind of like circumstance and your own opinion about them, but to treat them in the same kind of ferociously consistent way that God treats his people, which is just shining them with love. And so that's kind of what I would say about that. It's I think that's there's what was it? Lord of the Flies. Simon in Lord of the Flies. It's just, there's so many brilliant things in Lord of the Flies, but Simon is going through the jungle, and he's on this path, but he keeps falling because there's so many brambles. And he just made this comment. It's like, it's so hard to get to where you're going, which is over there, when you have so many things here that are trying to trip you. And that's how I view it. It's like, we're all trying for different things, but there's always going to be obstacles, and there's always going to be things that trip us up. And I think that what Jesus' teaching does is a couple things. This is not even close to what your question is. I'm sorry about that.
All right.
But I think that on one hand, it is the standard. This is what you need to be growing toward. This is where the path should be bringing you to. But then on the other hand, it's like, you can't let your daily life kind of like get in the way of remembering what the standard is, because that's what will happen with life. Is it's so easy to focus on your career, get your licensure, do your continuing education. Now you have a kid, you've got to, get diapers. You have to figure out how to get them into school. All these things. And then, also, by the way, this is how you should treat your neighbors. And this is how you should treat, if you don't take conscious time to think about what is the standard on how I should treat other people, you're going to just adapt whatever standard your society has. And the standard that our society has is built on the myth of redemptive violence. It's built on pragmatism. It's built on self-orientation. It's built on surround yourself with those that you want to be like. It's surround yourself with positive people. You are the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with. It's this, I need to be around people who will help me, instead of I need to help those around me, instead of what Jesus teaches. And that's why I think this teaching is so important, because it's a reminder on where we should be orienting how we treat other people, so that we're not letting the Marvel movies shape how we treat other people. We can enjoy the Marvel movies, but we just enjoy them for what they are.
Yeah, so true. I love the Marvel movies, to go on this tangent just for a moment. So much so. My family, we love them, but it is this huge thing of this redemptive, in order to save humanity, we must slaughter the enemy.
Yeah.
Dan, we got a little kitty cat this weekend. She's 10 weeks old, and we named her Loki. That's how much we love her.
That is so cool.
Cute. I'll have to show her sometime. Because, if you do watch the movies, if you do watch the current show Loki that's out on Disney Plus right now, you'll see that he is layered. Loki is layered, and there is good and there is bad. Anyway, so no one person is all of what you think they are. So As much as I love Marvel, I don't think we can base our life on that. I think this is where I am, because like I said, I'm pretty sure I would muck it up if given the ultimate test. I've confessed that. But this is where I am. The scripture says what the scripture says. And I do want to follow Jesus. And I do want my life to look more and more like him the more I grow in my relationship with him. And so for me, that means he's the standard, right? I look to him. I look to his character. I look to what he said. I look to what he was about. And I try to make steps toward that, and I fail, and I'm thankful for his grace and his forgiveness, but I try. And so when I look at this passage, I see that God does not discriminate when it comes to whom he loves and whom he offers his love to. So I shouldn't discriminate into, whom I show love to, or who I show grace to, or who I just, acknowledge. We are so quick to dehumanize people. And maybe it's hard for us in our everyday world to think of an enemy, brush off, or you kind of dehumanize, or you don't ascribe value to them. I think those are things that is not loving. And I want to kind of step away from most of that and be more like Jesus, and be a lot more less discriminatory as to who I show that love and that joy and that light to, like you said. So that's where I am. Maybe that's my first base. I can't even fathom the big thing, but the everyday thing, that's kind of where I'm going to focus. I think that's helpful.
That's great. Yep. I think that's good. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Dan, we have just under 5 minutes. And so I want to give you an opportunity to just slam it home for us. Like, just give us a nugget of something that you feel like the MuseCast community can't go without hearing from you. No pressure.
Wow.
No pressure.
That's a lot of pressure. Well, let's see. I think trying to think about like where we're going with this. I guess what I would say is that, and maybe this might be reiterating what we've already kind of talked about, is it's just that, like, when you engage, and the sermon's not about media, but it relates so much to our media, and in that's where we a lot of times get our understanding of common sense, and so I guess what I would say is that what would it look like if we were to try to solve our problems without kind of subscribing to the myth of redemptive violence? And what would it look like if instead of trying to surround ourselves with positive people, instead of trying to surround ourselves with people who can benefit us, what would it look like to surround ourselves with people that, won't benefit us at all? What would it look like to surround ourselves with people that maybe we don't like, and to be in relationship with people that we don't like? Because I think that's where, in the same way that, you don't build muscle by sitting on the couch, you build muscle by finding resistance, and you push against resistance. In the same way, I think you build your love muscles when you have resistance, when you have obstacles that you have to love through. And so that's kind of my challenge is, and it's those circumstances that really force us to be creative in how we relate to people. It's easy to relate to people that we like. It's easy to relate to people who benefit us. That's, who can't do that?
Right.
It's hard to relate to people that we don't like. And that's where I think real potential growth comes from. And so I guess that would be, it's not really an insight, but it's a challenge. And society, again, that common sense that Jesus pushes against, society is all about making it easy on ourselves by surrounding ourselves with people who are like-minded people. Is one. Surround yourself with like-minded people. Well, that's great. That's a really easy life. It's just that you're not going to get challenged at all. And you're not going to grow. And if you surround yourself with people who think just like you, the only direction you're going to go is to be more like you. And so, I guess that would be my final thought, is just as a challenge to try to relate to people who are different. And
I like that, Dan. I really do. Super good. Just briefly, I want to tag on to that. I like the use of your word resistance there, because like you said, if we want to get stronger, you're not just going to sit on the couch. You need resistance. You need to build that muscle. Yeah. And if we want to become more Christ-like, and hopefully we do, we need to build that muscle. And so we need to start in our everyday lives instead of looking for these big moments where we will meet this challenge or we don't meet the challenge. Like, look, we've got challenges every day if we look for them and we allow ourselves to see them. And if we can even challenge ourselves, like you said, to put ourselves in situations with people who aren't just like us, who think like us, who may provide some of that resistance so that we can exercise that muscle. That would be super an interesting way to see how we are growing in this whole concept of loving others, even our enemies, more than we naturally would, going against our natural instinct and reaching out and loving others. That could be a really interesting challenge for us all. I'm going to think about it. No, I'm going to do more than think about it. No, I am going to do more than think about it. Yeah, I think that's a great challenge and really good thought-provoking questions you asked there at the end, Dan. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for tuning in. And guess what? We're not done with this series. So if you were just like, I don't want to talk about this anymore, just hang in there. It's going to be okay. You're being stretched. We're growing together, hopefully. So come back, tune in this coming weekend for the sermon. We're still going to be talking about Against All Reason. And absolutely come back to the MuseCast next week, because we're going to continue the conversation. And Dan will challenge us even more, and we can just like pull our hair out and go crazy.
What sounds like a fun time, you know? Pulling.
Right.
What did you do this week? Well, I pulled my hair out and I went crazy. Wow, really? You must have watched the MuseCast.
You must have watched the MuseCast. That's right. All right, Dan, say bye to everyone. Our time always goes so quickly. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We'll see you next week.
Yeah. See ya.